case of Rosanna Galliano. Rosanna Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s. She was the youngest child, with two older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. Her parents were Raldo and Graciela. While details of her childhood and teenage years are scarce, it's known that she finished high school in the late 1990s. During this time, her father, Raldo, worked as a mechanic. In early 2001, Jose Arce visited Raldo's workshop, where he met Rosanna. Born on November 22, 1948, Jose had spent over 30 years living abroad, including time in Greece and the United States, where he was imprisoned for 4 years for drug trafficking. He returned to Argentina in 1996, owning 8 properties in a posh area of Buenos Aires. Jose and Rosanna started dating quickly after meeting at her father's shop, where he brought his vintage car for repairs. Despite their significant age difference, appeared financially stable thanks to his mother Elsa, who still lived in the United States. When 52-year-old Jose proposed to 22-year-old Rosanna, her mother Graciela expressed concerns about their age difference. Jose argued that age was not an obstacle to love, and Graciela turned to Rosanna for reassurance. Rosanna confirmed her desire to marry him in a whisper. The couple got married on November 17, 2001, just 7 months after meeting. Jose attributed his cheerful, modern, and smart personality to winning Rosanna over. They soon had a son named Gono, but problems began to emerge soon after. Jose was a controlling and jealous partner who frequently belittled Rosanna and her family. The emotional abuse escalated into physical violence, leaving Rosanna feeling trapped and terrified. Jose's intimidating presence, reinforced by his possession of 2 guns, allowed him to maintain control, a situation that Rosanna's family was painfully aware of. He would often flaunt his guns when they had visitors or when he visited others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house, telling her to shut up before hitting her. Another time, Rosanna's father noticed bruises on her back, and she revealed that Jose had dragged her across the pavement. Despite these challenges, Rosanna and Jose had their second child, and Rosanna tried to make the relationship work, hoping to provide a stable home for their children. However, her efforts were consistently thwarted by Jose's temper and disrespectful behavior. Moreover, Jose's mother Elsa exerted control over their household from a distance, making decisions about their lives during her brief visits to Argentina. By 2006, Rosanna had reached her breaking point after enduring years of unbearable abuse, and she finally found the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. Her family, however, remained largely oblivious to the full extent of her suffering. Months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint which included a request for a medical examination to document her injuries. It was then that she confided in her sister Monica, and the two made a pact to stay in close contact, reaching out to each other whenever something happened. Monica became Rosanna's safe haven and primary source of support, providing a refuge from the unbearable realities of life with Jose. Rosanna would often visit Monica's apartment with her children, though Jose would dictate when they had to return, frequently backing up his demands with death threats. Rosanna made the difficult decision to move in with Monica and the children, leaving Jose to stay in his own home. After a period of time, Rosanna took further action by filing another complaint and seeking a divorce, which resulted in a restraining order being issued against Jose. From then on, the only times they met were during child visitation sessions at a neutral location in El Romanzo exile, De La Cruz, as arranged by the court. Rosanna confided in her neighbor, Daniel Gonzalez, a married father of one who worked as a gardener. Rumors began to circulate about a possible romantic relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, although this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats persisted, and Rosanna shared a chilling voicemail with her brother Oscar, in which Jose casually spoke about killing her in mid-2007 while socializing with friends at a bar. Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, a 32-year-old man from Marino who worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly became close, exchanging phone numbers and starting a romantic relationship. Oscar was an old-fashioned gentleman who treated Rosanna with kindness, attention, and listened to her. which was a welcome change after all the turmoil she had faced. By December 2007, Oscar had become a part of Rosanna's holiday celebrations, even dressing up as Santa Claus to delight her two sons. However, their happiness was threatened by Jose, who was keeping a close eye on Rosanna's every move and was aware of her new relationship. The looming divorce had panicked him. Jose tried to persuade Rosanna to end things with Oscar by offering her a truck. She refused. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital, not Jose. Running out of options, Jose, with the help of his mother Elsa, concocted a plan to hire a hitman, whose identity remains unknown. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Reno to pick up her sons, aged 4 and 3. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming that Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. But Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself and asked for the children to be returned. The call was brief and Rosanna then went back inside. Around 10 p.m., Rosanna sent Oscar Lugo a casual text about their plans for the next day. Later, at 10:50 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again, unleashing a deadly trap. Rosanna stepped out into the garden to improve the reception, but a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees and shot her 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, hearing the shots, screamed as Rosanna staggered and fell. Panicked, Monica tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, oblivious to the events, attempted to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m., but got no response. He then tried to reach Monica, but she didn't answer. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered from an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence, but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was left stunned after being questioned and subsequently requested a lawyer to take over the proceedings before departing the following day. Meanwhile, a red sweater was discovered during further searches, which Rosanna's relatives identified as belonging to Jose, solidifying his position as the prime suspect in their minds. The case garnered widespread media attention, sending shockwaves throughout the country and sparking a scandal as Jose and his mother publicly proclaimed his innocence, while also making disparaging remarks about Rosanna and suggesting that her multiple lovers should be investigated instead. After the incident, Daniel the gardener became reclusive, shunning all human contact. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo observed Jose lurking in the distance, watching from his truck without offering condolences or joining the mourners. Jose's defense strategy later focused on discrediting Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole witness by raising questions about her behavior, such as why her clothes bore no bloodstains and why she had prioritized calling for help over assisting her sister. However, this theory lacked credibility, and the investigators counted that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to wield. The detectives also highlighted a crucial point. Anyone familiar with the house would know that Rosanna had to venture outside to get a cell signal, suggesting a high degree of premeditation in the crime. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and grandmother Elsa, while their grandmother Graciela was granted limited access. In contrast, Monica and Oscar were denied access, with Jose citing safety concerns for his sons, despite the legal restrictions. The children longed to see their Aunt Monica, prompting Jose to occasionally allow supervised visits. Monica seized these opportunities to take the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela successfully obtained visitation rights, although she was denied guardianship. In a contemporaneous interview, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had criminal records. According to Jose, Rosanna engaged in intimate relationships with these men to uncover their secrets, which she then leveraged to blackmail them for personal gain. Meanwhile, following threats, Oscar was placed under police protection as a protected witness in his sister's case, requiring him to wear a tracking bracelet. As 2007 drew to a close, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to bring charges against any of the suspects. However, a significant breakthrough came a year after the murder, when Jose was arrested in January 2008, charged with aggravated homicide due to their romantic relationship, premeditation, and the alleged involvement of multiple perpetrators. For years after the attack, Oscar exercised his visitation rights to take his nephews to play soccer, sharing a heartwarming hug with the 6- and 7-year-old boys. In April 2013, the trial commenced. Jose maintained his innocence during the May proceedings, but the trial was delayed when he suffered a stroke, ultimately pushing the final verdict to November 2013. The judges concluded that the murder was meticulously planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. Jose and Elsa were found to have chosen the time and place for the attack, aware that a phone call would lure Rosanna outside, rendering her vulnerable. The court determined that financial motives drove the murder, as Jose sought to avoid splitting the marital assets. Jose and Elsa received life imprisonment sentences. The higher court upheld the conviction, citing Jose's threats, the domestic violence endured by Rosanna, and the dominant influence of his mother. The actual perpetrators of the shooting were never identified. In 2015, Jose and Elsa were placed under house arrest, with Jose's health and Elsa's age cited as reasons, allowing the children to reunite with them. The media continued to follow the children's story for years, during which Monica and Graciela had no contact with them. The boys were shuffled between homes familiar to their father, but unknown to Rosanna's family. In January 2017, the court granted the children a weekend visit with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Galliano family prepared their home with fresh paint, a thorough cleaning and decorations, and Graciela cooked their favorite dish. That weekend, the Galliano home was filled with joy as the boys played soccer, video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after another stroke. The event was another devastating blow for the children who attended their father's funeral. During the funeral, they expressed their concerns about their future to their Aunt Monica, who reassured them with calmness and love, promising to support whatever they decided. They chose to live with Monica, who then had to confront Elsa to communicate the boys' decision. Through these and many other instances, it was clear that Monica always prioritized her nephew's wishes, whether they wanted to talk or preferred silence. Monica's primary goal was to provide stability and comfort for the boys. In March 2019, Zono decided against switching schools, opting to stay close to his friends and see out his final 2 years. He returned to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica pursued custody of Nawin. Things appeared to be settling, but tragedy struck in late November 2019, when 87-year-old Elsa was hospitalized and shortly after, passed away on November 30th. The following month, Monica was awarded custody of Nawin. By the end of the year, Jono had moved in with a family friend of his grandmother's. Both brothers still required psychological support to cope with their traumatic experiences, with Jono grappling with depression. Their psychologist acknowledged the staggering sequence of events they had endured. In March 2020, Jono's housemate passed away, prompting him to take refuge with his Aunt Monica until October of that year. When he turned 18, Jono rented a small apartment and began living independently, supported by the income generated from his inherited properties. Meanwhile, Monica initiated legal proceedings to secure their inheritance, fearing they might be stripped of their assets. Now when, on the other hand, demonstrated emotional stability thanks to the support he received and was encouraged to continue attending therapy as needed. This cold case takes us to Trinity, a city located in Randolph County in the state of North Carolina in the United States. Trinity is quite a small town with a population of just above 7,000 people as of 2020. The community is most famous for being named after Trinity College, which later became Duke University. Sealy Corporation, the world's largest manufacturer of bedding products, has their headquarters in Trinity. Tammy Holland was born in this enchanting town in the year 1964. Though little information is available about her early life, we do know that she had 2 sons during her marriage with her husband. However, we don't know what happened to him or why they separated. In the years that followed, Holland continued to live with her 2 sons in Trinity, North Carolina. According to the records available, Holland lived a routine, hardworking life. Since she was the only breadwinner in her family, she had to work multiple shifts and changed a number of jobs over the years looking for stability. When she turned 36, she finally found a job at Elizabeth's Pizza, where she ended up working for many years to follow. She would work the night shifts so she could be home with her children during the day and provide them with a loving environment as best she could. After some initial challenges, things finally began to go smoothly for the family. Her sons grew up, became self-sufficient, and moved out and settled on their own. By the time she was 50 years old in 2014, she had become a grandmother to 2 more boys. Everything seemed to be going perfectly until one fateful day. An incident occurred that would change all of their lives forever. On the 28th of October 2014, a surprising 911 call gained the attention of Randolph County Police. The person who made the 911 call was a neighbor of Holland's. According to the details released by the police, Holland's neighbor had been trying to get in touch with her but hadn't been able to get through and had assumed that she was just busy at work. On the 28th of October 2014, he decided to go check on her in person. It was around 2:10 a.m. when he reached Holland's house. Surprisingly, he noticed that her lights were still on. He also noticed that Holland's car was still in the driveway when at this time she normally would have been at work at Elizabeth's Pizza in Thomasville. This made him curious as to whether everything was all right, so he went to check on her, thinking that she was home. However, when he knocked on the door, there was no response. Confused, he then went to her window to see if she was inside the house. As he peered through, he saw her legs and then noticed her body lying motionless on the floor. This sent him into a panic and he rushed to call 911. The Randolph County policemen hurriedly made their way to the address given to them by the caller. When they arrived, they opened the door to Holland's home. There she was, lying dead in her living room. She was drenched in a pool of blood. The police and investigators then quickly sealed off the house and brought in their forensic investigators to examine the crime scene and the body. Holland's body was then taken for an autopsy. According to the autopsy report released by the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office, it was revealed that she was stabbed and then left to bleed to death. There were multiple stab wounds on her neck and body. This was ruled as the cause of death and the case was ruled a homicide. An assault test was also conducted, but no trace of semen was found on her. At the time of her death, she was staying alone in Laughlin Hill Mobile Home Park. After learning the cause of her death, the Randolph County Police started their investigation. At first, they conducted interviews with adjacent homes around Holland's, and they learned that Holland had a noisy argument in her home the night before she died. There was even a record of her calling 911 about the matter. However, when she was offered medical assistance and an investigation into the altercation, she declined. During the initial investigation, Randolph County Police had a number of people on their list of suspects, but were unable to unearth any specific evidence that pointed to any one of them being the culprit. Though the police gathered evidence at the crime scene, including DNA that did not belong to Holland, they could not find any matches within the system to point them towards who was behind this sinister act. The Randolph County Police did their best to find the culprit. They even offered a handsome reward of $5,000 for information about Holland's murder, but none of the tips they received were viable. Eventually, without any suspects or fresh leads to follow, the case went cold. However, all the important questions remained unanswered. Who could have murdered Tammy Holland? Was it the same person with whom she had an argument on the day before her death? Or was it someone else entirely? Although years had passed without answers, the county's investigators were still eager to solve Tammy Holland's murder case. In 2020, they reopened the case and began a fresh investigation, making use of every piece of information at their fingertips, including the genetic evidence collected from the crime scene. They first began the investigation by submitting the DNA evidence to the CODIS system. 3 years later, the system produced a match. However, to their surprise, they didn't find one suspect but 2. The culprits were identified as Roy Lee White and Florence Keene. On January 26, 2023, a warrant was brought out against Roy Lee White and Florence Keene. Roy was wanted for felony accessory after the fact of first-degree murder, according to the warrant. Who were Roy Lee White and Florence Keene, and what was their connection to Holland? Though we do not have much information on Florence, we do know that Roy was born in 1967, the same year Tammy Holland was born. He married Florence Keene while he was in his mid-20s. The couple lived together in a mobile home and were actually Holland's neighbors. According to sources, it was found that Roy and his wife Florence were well associated with Holland. As neighbors, they would often meet and talk. With a warrant issued against the pair, the police had now made Roy and Florence wanted criminals. Both Roy and Florence had successfully managed to evade the police for almost a decade, but thanks to DNA evidence, Tammy's culprits had now been identified. With the perpetrators on the loose, Randolph County Police went all in to find the whereabouts of the couple. They looked for Roy Lee White in the neighborhood where he had once lived, but they couldn't find him. He was clearly on the run. Luckily, on February 7, 2023 at 11:10 p.m., the Randolph County Sheriff's Office Criminal Apprehension Team located and apprehended Roy at the O'Connell Lodge on Brentwood Street, High Point, North Carolina. He was then transported to the Randolph County Detention Center and taken in front of the magistrate, who issued a $60,000 secured bond and set a first appearance for February 8, 2023 in Randolph County District Court. With Roy finally arrested, the investigators wanted an open confession about the murder. He complied with his arrest and cooperated with the police. During the interrogation, Roy was asked about the murder and about the whereabouts of his wife Florence. In an open confession, he revealed that on the night of October 28, 2014, it was Florence who stabbed Holland while she bled to death in her home. Roy had quickly assumed control of the situation by concealing the knife that was used to kill Holland after the crime was committed. When the investigators came to their door after the murder, the couple managed to play their part, which was simply enough to not get themselves arrested. They were successful in that, and the police never had any idea that it was them who had committed the crime. The couple then managed to stay out of trouble for almost a decade until DNA evidence led straight to them. However, in 2018, Florence died due to natural causes, which led to Roy getting evicted from his home. He then became a vagabond and started living in hotels for short stints before moving on to the next one. It was in one of these hotels that the Randolph police found Roy and where they finally arrested him. However, the question remained, how had the couple evaded the police this whole time? Why weren't they suspects in the murder of Holland? Well, at the time of the initial investigation, before the case went cold, they had been questioned by detectives. However, they had managed to evade detection by pretending to not know anything about the murder. But in 2020, when multiple detectives started looking into the cold case of Tammy Holland again, they found DNA evidence that led them straight to Roy and his wife Florence. Though no further details were released about the murder, after Roy's confession, the sheriff's office did release some details of the murder, which included the DNA evidence, the crime scene details, and other pieces of information. With her killer caught, her loved ones came out to remember Holland when the news was announced. Her friends and family members stated that throughout her life she was a devoted employee and friend and an extremely kind-hearted person. Aldo DePorto, the owner of Elizabeth's Pizza where Holland was employed till her last day, said, "She was always happy, smiling when she came in." He also noted that Tammy Holland was the kind of person to always be there for her coworkers and she got along with everyone. She was one of the good people in the world and a very good person to work with. With Holland gone, the staff had continued to feel her loss for all those years. "We still remember her," he said. "We remember the way she was and we're never going to forget her, you know? She's going to be a lifetime deal." DePorto also added that he doesn't want to judge Roy or Florence. Instead, his thoughts are with Holland's family. "We keep Tammy in prayer," he further added. "We love the way she was when she was working here. We keep her in our hearts and I pray for her family." The case of Anna Alexieva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music, and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children, and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016 when a high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him. Despite the physical distance between them, those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, she had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips, and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house, and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival, as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William and, as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew, and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle, sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick. That was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone, and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Ailey Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity, as there was no identification found with her body, and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon, but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William, where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's following Anna's death. William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts, and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp, offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle, but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates, and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March, when Anna mistakenly posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering, but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store, not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the Alp General Store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, Michelle was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019, with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an alone car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a lighthearted family comment, even if it was a bit extreme. She acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held onto it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail, where Anna's life was tragically cut short, to pay their respects to her memory. Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored. The prosecutor, Amy Matsuko, stated, "Today's case will take us to the city of Los Angeles, which is a bustling metropolis located in Southern California. It is famous for its stunning beaches, iconic Hollywood sign, and star-studded sidewalks. Los Angeles is also a hub for the arts and entertainment industry, with world-renowned museums, theaters, and music venues. From delicious food to thriving fashion and technology industries, there's something for everyone in this diverse and dynamic city." William Newton was born on July 26, 1965 in the city of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. His father was Richard Harriman. His parents were not married in 6 months after Newton's birth. His half-sister, Oliver Michelle, came into the world. The two siblings were simply inseparable while growing up. As a child, Newton discovered his passion for art and frequently filled his free time with creative writing. His poems were a reflection of his soul, and his imagination ran wild. He was also an avid reader and yearned for the day when he could share his own stories with the world. Newton was a very intelligent young man. Richard once told the media about his son. Newton spent a good portion of his childhood in the city where he was born. It was there he attended both primary and middle school. Upon completing middle school, he moved with his mother, whose name remains unclear, to the city of Ladysmith, which is also within the state of Wisconsin. The change in environment was all too sudden for Newton, but over time he slowly began to get used to it. However, Newton was only able to complete his freshman year of high school in the new city before his mother began talking about leaving for a new place yet again. This time around, they moved to the city of Oklahoma. This was in the year 1980. Newton soon got tired of the seemingly endless circle of moving from one place to another and desired more stability. And so one day he packed his bags and traveled down to be with his father, Richard. He was only 16 at the time and had made up his mind to begin living with his father. He was certain that he would welcome him with open arms. However, this turned out not to be the case. Upon getting to Richard's home in Eau Claire, he was given a shocking reception. Instead of the warm welcome he had anticipated, he was told to leave, and Richard refused to let him inside, slamming the door shut in his face. The cold treatment was a stark contrast to what Newton had expected, leaving him broken and defeated. But in that moment, something inside him shifted. He embraced his independence and made the bold decision to set off on his own. The next 3 years would see Newton traveling around the United States. One of the cities he lived in was Oklahoma, and there he met a man named Terry Elliott with whom he started a romantic relationship. Newton also discovered that he had a passion for beauty and makeup, and so he decided to turn it into a career by taking steps to become a professional beautician. He learned all about skincare, makeup techniques, and the latest beauty trends, and within a matter of months, he had earned his beautician license. In 1984, he moved to Los Angeles and began a new life there. Despite the challenges that came with starting a new life in a new city, He didn't have to wait long for employment opportunities to come knocking. Armed with his wealth of expertise and experience, he quickly caught the attention of an entertainment company producing music videos. Soon enough, they hired him as a beautician and a choreographer. In addition to this, Newton took up a job at a gay bathhouse known as the Hollywood Spa. One fateful night at the spa, he met a man by the name of David Ray, who took an instant liking to him. David had been in the area to judge a beauty contest for a local gay magazine. Their meeting was the start of an unexpected and new journey for Newton. David was an adult movie producer who specialized in gay adult videos. David saw potential in Newton and took him under his wing, introducing him to the industry and helping him land roles in several of his movies. Newton's and David's relationship went beyond just business. It eventually blossomed into a romantic one. By 1987, the two formed a partnership and decided to create their own adult movie company, which they named London Ray Productions. Newton began working at the company using his expertise as a movie producer, makeup artist, and set designer to the table. He produced movies using the alias Bill E. London and also went on to act in several films under the name Billy London and Billy Porter. They would often film movies in their apartment, and Newton would redecorate the rooms to make it appear as if they were shooting in different locations. With money beginning to roll in, Newton and David began living life in the fast lane. When they weren't on a movie set, they spent their nights partying at clubs and indulging in drugs. This lifestyle became a routine for them, and it was one they would stick to for many years. In 1990, the lovers' relationship took a hit and they began to live separately. Around that time, Newton also felt like he had had enough of Los Angeles and that he needed a change of scenery. And so he decided to temporarily move to Las Vegas, where his sister Michelle was living at the time. He was tired of LA, Newton's sister Michelle recalls. He just needed a mental health break. Apart from the fact that Las Vegas was going to offer him something new and exciting, it would also afford him the chance to meet up with his mother, who at the time was planning on settling in the area. Everything was set, and Newton began counting down the days to when he would leave for Las Vegas. However, fate had a different plan. On the evening of October 28, 1990, Newton visited a popular club in Los Angeles known as Rage Nightclub. He made his way towards his favorite spot within the club and sat down to observe those who were making merry around him. Before long, Newton was feeling the rhythm and he joined in the fun. He sipped on a few drinks and let loose, losing himself in the excitement of the night. Hours flew by, and soon enough he realized it was time to go home. He got up to leave, and anyone who saw him at that moment would be able to instantly tell that he was intoxicated. He managed to make his way to the exit and left the building. That would be the last time anyone would see him alive. The next day, as the week began on a Monday morning, most Los Angeles residents carried on with their daily routines, unaware of a murder that would terrify many. That same morning, in an alley, directly behind Santa Monica Boulevard, a homeless person searched through dumpsters seeking for food or discarded items. When he opened one particular dumpster, he got the shock of his life. Sitting right in the middle of the trash and staring right back at him was a human head. The rest of the body was nowhere to be found, but the homeless man could spot a pair of feet that had been carelessly thrown beside the head. It was all too much for him to take in, and the man closed the dumpster in horror. He quickly raised an alarm, alerting others about the vile discovery, and in no time, police officers arrived on the scene in their vehicles. The person with the dismembered head in the dumpster was soon identified, and it was none other than Newton. Retired Detective Wendy Burnt was one of the first officers to arrive at the scene on the day of the murder, and was shaken to her core by how brutal it was. It was just so heinous in my mind that something like this could happen, and it didn't matter to me that Bill was gay or that he worked in the adult content field, Wendy said. The autopsy that was performed on Newton revealed that he had an addictive drug known as methamphetamine in his system before he was killed. There was also evidence to show that he had been strangled before being beheaded. Detectives immediately began an investigation to determine what exactly had happened to Newton, and how he ended up in such a state. Heading the team of investigators assigned to the case was Wendy, and she ensured that she gave it her all. It was a murder that I felt was my responsibility to solve. So I put everything into this case, Wendy said. In the months that followed after the murder, Tips poured in from different sources and detectives looked into all of them, but none proved to be of any use. Nobody seemed to know who had killed Newton or where the rest of his body was. Detectives had nothing solid to work with for a long time, and eventually the case went cold. In 2005, 15 years after the murder, the Los Angeles Police Department issued a statement that they were making efforts towards reinvestigating the case. But this time too, nothing really came out of the investigation and everything went silent. After this, the case made the news again towards the end of the following year in 2006. This time around, a reporter by the name of Mickey Ski claimed that Newton's father had reportedly reached out to him, saying that the Los Angeles Police Department had neglected his son's murder case and could have done much more to try and solve it. In response to this accusation, the LAPD reached out to the public and released a statement to say that they had not given up on the case and were trying their best to solve it. Sadly, Richard never got to see justice for his son's murder. He passed away in his home on May 30th, 2011 at the age of 65. Around 2020, two authors and best friends Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn developed a fascination with Newton's murder. Christopher had gotten to know about the case after an adult entertainment journalist wrote about it, and since then it had remained fixed in his mind. Christopher and Eric also happened to co-host a podcast known as The Dinner Party Show, which they began in 2012. It happened that during one of the podcast episodes, Christopher decided to mention his interest in Newton's murder and how fascinated he was that there had never been an arrest and no publicly announced leads in the case. He then concluded by asking the listeners for helpful information regarding the case. 2 months after this, Christopher and Eric did another episode of their podcast, and in this one, they shared some of the things they had been able to dig up since the last time they talked about Newton's murder. According to Christopher, an unidentified man had reached out to him, saying that he had some important information about the murder case. According to what the man told Christopher, he had seen Newton at Rage nightclub the evening before he turned up dead in a dumpster. However, he claimed Newton had not left the club alone, but had been in the company of a man that looked like the well-known serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. When Christopher did a background check on Dahmer, he discovered that he was a serial killer who murdered 17 boys and men in the Milwaukee area from the late 70s to the early 90s. But in 1991, a year after Newton's gruesome murder, Dahmer was finally arrested by the authorities and was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences. There was no doubt that Dahmer's profile fitted that of someone who could have potentially murdered Newton. However, there was no way to confirm this because Dahmer was already dead. He was attacked and beaten to death by a fellow inmate back in November 1994. After detailing in the podcast all he had uncovered about Newton's murder and its possible connection with Dahmer, Christopher continued to remain hopeful that someone who knew something would come forward with additional information. Around the same time in 2012, Detective John Lamberti of the Los Angeles Police Department began to develop an interest in this case. After going through all the materials his predecessors had on the murder, he was shocked by the amount of work they had put towards having it solved. They investigated the hell out of this case, Detective Lamberti told the media. Taking into consideration all the previous investigative work in the case, Lamberti also began to look more intently at every angle. One of the first things he did was do a Google search about Newton's name. In the search result, he came across the episode of Christopher and Eric's podcast in which they talked about Newton's murder and speculated about Dahmer being his killer. Clicking on it and listening to all the two men had to say did nothing but pique Detective Lamberti's interest in the case. At some point after this, he reached out to both Christopher and Eric to schedule a meeting with them. During this meeting, the three men swapped information and talked extensively about all they knew about the case. From that moment, an alliance was formed and they had one mutual goal, which was to solve the case for good. While all of this was going on, Rachel Mason, a documentary filmmaker, has also gotten obsessed with the case and was busy carrying out her own underground investigation. She had learned about Newton's murder by accident. This was back in 2017 when she was working on a documentary about an adult bookstore and gay adult content store called The Circus of Books. While looking for solid content for the documentary, she paid a visit to a local writer and an activist by the name of Mike Szymanski. Mike had an old collection of West Hollywood photos and he had agreed to allow her to look through them. As he and Rachel were going through one of his notebooks during the search, a brittle newspaper article from 1990 suddenly fell out and caught Rachel's eye. The article was about Newton's murder and how the authorities had no leads as to who had carried out the act. Rachel immediately asked Mike about what it was all about, and Mike gladly filled her in on all the details he knew surrounding the mysterious murder. She was intrigued by the story she heard. However, she did not think much of it after that. She went to work on the Circus of Books film, and after completing it, she immediately started searching for a new project to work on. It was during this period that she recollected the story she had heard from Mike about Newton's murder. She couldn't shake it off and slowly grew fascinated by it. This made her take a closer look, and she also began investigating the case. Rachel was determined to gather every piece of information she could find. For this, she resolved to ask the public for any tips or insights they might have. And that was when she received a message from Clark Williams, a gay stay-at-home dad living in Sherman Oaks. Williams grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, just like Newton. Due to this, he believed he could help Rachel fill in the blanks of Newton's life story, since he had a unique perspective on what it was like growing up in Eau Claire. Rachel was thrilled at the new development. She wondered if she had finally gotten someone who could shed some light on the mystery of Newton's upbringing. To find out, she eagerly arranged a meeting with Williams to hear what he had to say. During the meeting, she found out that Williams had first gotten to know about Newton's murder while scrolling through a Facebook group. He had stumbled on a particular post about the 1990 murder, and it had immediately caught his attention. And as he read the details, he was struck by how similar Newton's background was to his. From that moment, he could not stop thinking about the case and decided to take matters into his own hands. Something was propelling me, moving me to just get involved in whatever capacity that I could, Williams said. What I really wanted to do was to help tell Billy's story, because I think he reflected the lives of so many young gay men and teenagers who came up in that time, he added. After connecting with Rachel and sharing all that he knew with her, he began to nurture an even deeper interest in the murder. Eventually, Detective Lamberti also got to find out about Rachel and Williams' interest in the case, and he soon brought them into the fold. Every one of Williams' free moments became an opportunity for him to try and get closer to solving the case. It wasn't long after this that he learned of a local amateur detective named Rick Paske, who had dedicated a good portion of his time and energy to cracking the mystery of Newton's murder after it had occurred. Rick had also worked closely with retired Detective Wendy in the initial investigation. Much to his disappointment, Williams found out that Rick was long dead, so there was no way to reach out to him. However, through his tireless and thorough research, he was able to find out some other important details about Rick. And this was that in addition to owning and running a skate shop in West Hollywood, Rick also led a double life as a gay adult video producer under the alias Richard Lawrence. Williams realized he needed to find the link between Rick and Newton, as they had both been working in the same industry at the same time. Williams began to meticulously go through the credits of Rick's films in search of names of actors, producers, and editors. His aim was to track down anyone who may still be alive to share their stories. The movies he placed priority on were those that had been produced around the time of Newton's murder. One film in particular caught his attention. It was titled The Devil and Danny Webster, and it had introduced a promising young actor named Billy Houston. Williams immediately took a special interest in Billy and began to uncover as much as he could about him. When he probed deeper, he discovered that Billy's real name was Darrell Lynn Madden, and he was in prison serving a life sentence for the murder of 2 men. According to what Williams found out, when he had been caught, Darrell had confessed to the police about his crimes, saying that he and another man named Bradley Qualls had committed the first offense. On the day of the incident, both Darrell and Bradley had gone out with a sinister plan to initiate Bradley into a white supremacist group known as Chaos Squad Skinheads. And to do this, they had to kidnap a gay man. They waited in the area patiently for an unlucky individual to pass by. A man named Stephen Domer was the one who unfortunately fell into their well-laid trap. Both Darrell and Bradley lured their victims to a deserted area, bound him in his own vehicle, and took him on a ride. Despite the pleas of the poor man, it all ended with him being strangled to death with a coat hanger. After seeing that they had killed him, the 2 men then disposed of the body in a nearby creek. In a twist, Darrell later shot his accomplice, Bradley, for some unknown reason and then fled the scene. But he could not hide for long and was later captured by the police. This had all happened in the city of Oklahoma. Williams did not stop after finding out all this. He went further and soon found out that Daryl had done an interview for a book titled American Honor Killings. Williams knew that the book could contain more potentially important information and so decided to try to get his hands on it. He ordered the book online, and after waiting for what seemed like an eternity, it finally arrived. He immediately began reading, and as he flipped through the pages, he was struck with disbelief at what he read. Daryl not only talked about taking the life of Stephen in the book, but he also talked about another killing in Los Angeles. However, he failed to provide details about that particular incident. The shocking revelation left Williams stunned and excited. He knew he was onto something. Newton had been murdered in Los Angeles and Daryl had confessed to killing someone in that same city. Williams strongly believed that Newton was the individual Daryl had referred to. But to be certain, he decided to reach out to Detective Lamberti and inform him about everything he had found out. Lamberti wasted no time and immediately set to work. He did a background check on Daryl. To his surprise, he discovered that the gay adult video production company which Daryl had worked for was situated on Santa Monica Boulevard, which was the area where Newton's body had been found. The detective knew it was all too much of a coincidence and decided that he was going to visit Daryl to question him. And so on January 4th, Detective Lamberti and Detective Tamara Mamies traveled to Oklahoma where Daryl was serving the sentence for his crimes. Much to their surprise, they found out that Daryl was now a proud transgender woman and an Orthodox Jew who had changed her name to Darylyn. The air buzzed with anticipation as Lamberti and Mamies took their seats across from Darylyn, who sat with a confident grace, ready to answer any questions the two detectives had. During the course of their conversation, they asked Darylyn about Newton's murder and were shocked when Darylyn was immediately aware of who they were talking about. Darylyn explained that on the day of Newton's murder, he and two of his friends had seen Newton walking along the street. Newton had appeared intoxicated, and for this reason, they saw him as an easy target for a robbery. He was soon abducted, but things went south from there. Darylyn confessed that it had ended with Newton being strangled to death. Detective Lamberti and his colleague were shell-shocked as Darylyn came to the end of the explanation. They could hardly believe their ears. Next, they then asked how and why Newton's body had been mutilated. But Darylyn claimed to have nothing to do with it. Darylyn told them that Newton's body was left with his two friends after they killed him. When asked for the identity of the two accomplices, Darylyn refused to mention any names. In the days that followed this, Detective Lamberti presented a strong case against Darylyn to the LA County District Attorney, George Gaskin's office. However, much to their disappointment, Gaskin's office announced that they would not be filing charges against him as the evidence was not strong enough. But despite this, Lamberti and the others who had worked round the clock on the case were beyond happy that it had finally been solved. Michelle was also grateful for the detectives' dedication to the case, and the closure they had given her by finally solving it. Newton's murder was a cruel event that shook the city of Los Angeles for over 3 decades. The thought of his killer finally being identified and being behind bars brings a sense of justice being rendered. However, the whereabouts of the rest of his body is still a mystery that may haunt the city forever. The case of Jenna Oakley. Jenna Oakley was born on March 2, 2001, in Indiana. She lived with her mother and 2-year-old brother in a troubled home. Due to her mother's neglect and inability to provide a stable life, Jenna often found herself left alone from a young age. The situation worsened over time, leading to intervention from Child Protective Services in April 2016. As a result, Jenna and her brother were removed from their mother's care and relocated to live with Philip Oakley, who their father and his wife, Rhonda, who was 52 years old at the time. Rhonda welcomed the children into her home and accepted them as her own. Philip later revealed that Rhonda had been eager to be a good mother to her stepchildren from the start. She welcomed them into her home with open arms and worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for them. Jenna was a difficult child to manage. Despite her academic success, which earned her praise from her teachers, she struggled to follow the rules in her new home. Her behavior became an even greater concern when her parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, whom she had met at the age of 10 while living with her mother in Indiana. Kenneth was a mysterious figure who seemed to be both a supportive influence and a hindrance in Jenna's life. To better understand the events that unfolded, it's essential to delve into Rhonda's story and explore the complexities of her personality, as well as the significant impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Oakley was born on March 5, 1964, in Casey County, Kentucky, to parents Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. She graduated from Casey County High School in 1982 and went on to work for 30 years in a prominent company that specialized in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Rhonda was a kind, loving, and cheerful person who was highly respected by her friends, who admired her warmth and kindness towards others. Rhonda met Philip Oakley on a golf course, and they fell deeply in love. They decided to get married and start a new life together. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. At the time, Rhonda was divorced and had 4 children from her previous marriage. Philip and Rhonda's family were initially against their relationship due to their significant age difference. They asked Philip to end the relationship, which led to frequent arguments within the family. For that reason, Philip believed the relationship of Kenneth and Jenna was unacceptable because Kenneth was 5 years older than his daughter, Jenna. Philip even threatened to involve the police if Kenneth continued to date Jenna. To maintain control of the situation, Philip and Rhonda took measures such as confiscating Jenna's phone and computer and enforcing strict rules. The situation at home became so unbearable for she that she finally confided in her father and stepmother, promising to end her relationship with Kenneth. However, she failed to keep this promise and continued to secretly meet with him. As a result, her relationship with her parents deteriorated, and she began to harbor a deep-seated hatred towards her parents. On September 1, 2016, at around 4 p.m., David, her younger brother, returned home from school and entered the house. As he walked into the kitchen, he was startled by the sound of 3 of their dogs barking frantically in the basement. Curious, David rushed downstairs to investigate and found his mother, Rhonda, lying motionless on the floor. Panicked, David immediately ran outside to seek help and eventually went to a neighbor's house to call the police. When the emergency services arrived, they were unable to revive Rhonda, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The police found deep cuts on her neck, indicating a brutal attack. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but upon further investigation, they discovered that nothing in the house had been stolen or disturbed. The investigation into Rhonda's death began, and her family and friends were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence came to light. Rhonda's car was discovered to be missing, and a trash can in the kitchen was found to contain vomit. Furthermore, one of the large meat cleavers from the kitchen was found to be missing, leading investigators to suspect that it may have been the weapon used to attack Rhonda. When Philip returned home, he was questioned by detectives and informed them that his daughter, Jenna, had not attended school that day. In fact, Jenna had been unreachable since the incident, and her teachers had called Philip early in the morning to report her absence. This led the police to believe that Jenna may have been kidnapped by the same individuals who killed Rhonda and that she may be in danger. During the questioning, detectives asked Philip if he knew of anyone who might have wanted to harm Rhonda or the family. Philip revealed that his daughter's boyfriend, Kenneth, had a troubled relationship with Jenna and that it had deteriorated significantly. Philip admitted that he had threatened to contact the police if Kenneth did not stop seeing Jenna. Philip suspected that his daughter had been dishonest with him and that she and Kenneth had never intended to break up or follow the rules. It was possible that Kenneth had planned to get rid of the source of his problems and take Jenna with him. After learning this, the police focused their efforts on finding Kenneth. They discovered that on August 31st, the day before the incident, Kenneth had flown from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky at 3 a.m. From there, he took a taxi to Oakley's house. Another crucial piece of evidence came from a store manager in Denver who claimed to have seen Jenna with a young man on September 1st. The manager handed over surveillance footage to the police, which showed Jenna and Kenneth entering the store and then leaving together to get into a car that looked like Rhonda's stolen vehicle. Notably, Jenna appeared calm and normal in the footage, not showing any signs of distress or being coerced. Her behavior led investigators to dismiss the possibility that she was being held against her will and raised suspicions that she might be involved in a crime against her stepmother. A search of Jenna's room later revealed a diary that confirmed these suspicions. The diary exposed a deep-seated hatred that her family seemed to be unaware of. Jenna wrote about her ongoing feelings for Kenneth, with whom she had maintained contact despite promising to stay away. Interspersed with these entries were expressions of resentment towards her family members, which grew increasingly disturbing over time. Jenna wrote in her diary that she intended to kill her father, stepmother, and brother to prevent them from ever separating her from Kenneth again, allowing her to be with him without interference. She outlined a specific plan and timeline to carry out these actions. When her father, Philip, read her words, he was overcome with shock and fainted. He struggled to comprehend that his daughter would not only conceive of such a heinous act, but also possessed the determination to make it a reality. Jenna had a plan to kill her family members. First, she intended to kill her father between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. by luring him to the basement and stabbing him in the neck. Her next target was Rhonda, whom she planned to kill in her bedroom between 6 o'clock and 8 a.m. using the same knife. After that, she planned to kill her brother David in his room. The police discovered Jenna's diary at the start of their investigation, which became the primary evidence against her. Meanwhile, Philip gave the police Kenneth's phone number, allowing them to track and apprehend Kenneth and his girlfriend. On September 4th, 3 days after the crime, investigators located the fugitives in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The police informed local authorities about the case, who quickly located Rhonda's stolen car near a hotel where Kenneth and Jenna were staying. They were arrested and transported separately to a New Mexico detention center, awaiting extradition. However, a search of the car did not yield the weapon used in the attack on Rhonda. Kenneth chose not to face trial. He attempted to take his own life in his cell by hanging himself and wrote a letter. Officers found him and rushed him to the hospital, where he was in critical condition. In his letter, Kenneth claimed responsibility for the crime and stated that he and Jenna acted according to his plan, attempting to take the blame to absolve her. The authorities kept Kenneth's attempt on his own life and his confession from Jenna for a time, deciding it was best she didn't know while being transported to Kentucky. They wanted her to give her own testimony without being influenced by Kenneth's upon arriving in Kentucky. Jenna also confessed to the crime, providing the police with a detailed account of her actions. According to Jenna, on the day before the crime, Kenneth visited her at her house. They met early in the morning, which is why Jenna didn't attend school that day. They spent the entire day together. Rhonda arrived home around 3 p.m. and encountered Kenneth in the basement. This encounter sparked an argument between Rhonda and Jenna, which eventually turned violent. The violence escalated to the point where Jenna attempted to strangle Rhonda by grabbing her neck. Kenneth then intervened, taking over from Jenna. He grasped Rhonda's throat with such force that she soon lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Once Rhonda was unconscious, Jenna took a kitchen knife and inflicted fatal wounds on her neck, leading to her death. Witnessing the scene caused Kenneth to become ill, and he vomited into a trash can. When questioned by the police about the knife used in the crime, Jenna stated that she and Kenneth had disposed of it during their escape. They had wrapped the knife in a bag and thrown it away at a fast food restaurant. Provided this testimony while Kenneth was still in serious condition at the hospital. He was charged with first-degree murder but was unable to stand trial due to his self-inflicted injuries. After 6 weeks on life support, he passed away. In October 2019, Jenna was formally charged with her stepmother's death. The charges alleged she either caused the death or collaborated with someone else. She also faced a theft charge. Jenna was held without bail at a juvenile detention center. Her father, Philip, stated he didn't care that she was his daughter and felt she didn't deserve his protection after the incident. He hoped Jenna would receive the punishment she deserved. Jenna wasn't informed of Kenneth's death until a court hearing, where she fainted upon learning the news. After regaining consciousness, she screamed, cried, and struggled to calm down. In January 2019, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and expressed regret for her actions in court the following month. She expressed remorse for the pain, anger, and disappointment she caused. Upon learning of the plea deal, Philip expressed disappointment, stating that the system failed to prevent the crime against his wife. He claimed there were warning signs that Jenna was in trouble, but no one took action. Philip added that people often advise going to the police immediately, which he and his wife did, yet they still found themselves in a terrible situation. At the sentencing hearing in March, Susan Hooper, a mitigation specialist for the defense, explained that the defendant suffered from abuse, violence, neglect, and lack of basic human rights throughout her life. The lawyer questioned what could have driven a 15-year-old with no history of violence to commit such a crime. The lawyer noted that Jenna had no prior record, was respected by teachers and peers, and it was unclear what led her to take such a desperate step. It was also noted that none of Jenna's family attended the hearing. Philip declined to participate, and Jenna's mother never appeared in court to learn her daughter's fate. This was unusual, as parents typically show interest in the case's progress, even in difficult cases where the accused has committed serious crimes. The lawyer, Susan, gathered extensive evidence and records showing that Jenna was abandoned by her mother, Christ, who neglected her well-being. Susan conducted an in-depth examination of Jenna's early life by reviewing child care and medical records in Indiana and Kent. She also interviewed various individuals who knew Jenna, including neighbors, family friends, caregivers, teachers, school counselors, and her older half-sister. The sister's testimony was particularly relevant, as she had lived with Jenna for several years. According to the sister, they never had a stable or safe home environment. After Chris divorced from Philip, she started working at a local Indiana prison where she became romantically involved with an inmate. She eventually posted bail for him and he moved into their home. This marked the beginning of a nightmare for Jenna, who was only 3 years old at the time. The man consistently robbed them and brought other women into the house, all while Jenna and her brother were present. A neighbor contacted Child Services after discovering that Jenna's family home was infested with rats and that the young children were being left alone all day. When a social worker visited the home, she encountered a hostile mother who refused to let her inside. Upon eventually gaining entry, the social worker was met with a horrific scene. The house was filled with rotting food, piles of trash, rat droppings, and human waste. The kitchen was overrun with unwashed dishes covered in mold and infested with rodents and insects, including a large number of cockroaches and fleas. The children were living in deplorable conditions with no regard for their safety. They had unrestricted access to medications and other hazardous substances, further endangering their well-being. Despite efforts to improve their situation, relocating Jenna and her younger brother to live with their father in Kentucky did not alleviate their problems. Susan stated that Philip and Rhonda neglected them, forcing Jenna to sleep in an unclean basement. However, the lawyer countered that Jenna had simply moved from one unstable home to another. Prosecutor Richie Borms presented evidence during the hearing, demonstrating that Philip made every effort to provide for the children's needs and create a good home. Despite the defense attorney's claims, Borms argued that if abuse or neglect had occurred, Child Care Services would have been notified by Jenna's neighbors, friends, or teachers. Furthermore, the prosecutor inquired if the defense attorney was aware of Jenna's relationship with Kenneth and the fact that her parents disapproved of they. The defense attorney stated that Kenneth was the only person who genuinely cared for the accused, Jenna. According to the defense, Jenna's past experiences had left her with unmet emotional needs. She was searching for someone to provide her with the love and care she had always lacked, and having lost that person, she was now devastated. Defense attorney Anthony Leetainer presented scientific documents to justify Jenna's behavior. The articles explained how the child abuse Jenna suffered at a young age had negatively impacted her psychological development. Anthony told the court that his conversations with Jenna led him to believe that she lacked parental love and that her strained relationship with her mother contributed to her inappropriate relationship with Kenneth. Jenna supported the statement by reading a letter in which she expressed her deep regret and apologized to her family for her actions. She acknowledged the pain she had caused Rhonda's family and friends and claimed that she had since become a completely different person, distinct from the Jenna who committed the crime. When Philip stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. He and his daughter were visibly anxious about the impending conversation. Philip approached Jenna, looked her straight in the eye, and asked what had driven her to commit such a serious offense. He reminded her that as her father, he had always treated her with respect, and that Rhonda had never spoken ill of her or caused her harm. Philip explained that when they took Jenna in, it was to give her a better life and that Rhonda had cared for her like her own daughter. However, Philip acknowledged that Jenna had been a challenging teenager and that he and Rhonda had discussed sending her to a specialized institution to help her get back on track. Philip also shared his concerns about Jenna's relationship with Kenneth, describing him as a predator who had taken advantage of his underage daughter. Philip revealed that when he discovered Jenna and Kenneth were still in contact despite being forbidden from doing so, he reported Kenneth to the police and warned him to stay away from Jenna, threatening legal action if necessary. Philip turned to his daughter, visibly shaken. He condemned her crime as unforgivable, citing Rhonda's exceptional character as a wonderful woman and mother, unmatched by anyone. He emphasized how Jenna's actions had devastated not only Rhonda but also others. Philip then questioned why Jenna planned to harm him and her brother, arguing that she was not a victim, but rather someone influenced by circumstance. Despite this, he concluded by reaffirming his love for her, saying that regardless of her actions, she would always be his daughter. Jenna, overwhelmed, burst into tears, shouting at her father that she never felt part of the family and had never experienced his love. Following this outburst, the judge called for a recess to deliberate the verdict. On March 27, 2019, the verdict was announced. Jenna Oakley was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for car theft. She would be eligible for parole in 2034. This case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails, and those who commit heinous crimes will face their due punishment. Today's case will take us to Lexington, North Carolina. The city boasts of a rich and diverse cultural heritage, and one of its main attractions is its world-renowned barbecue, earning it the title Barbecue Capital of the World. Apart from its delicious cuisine, Lexington has a charming downtown filled with unique shops and restaurants, showcasing the city's friendly and welcoming spirit. The city's historic uptown Lexington district is a popular area, and it features beautifully restored buildings that date back to the early 19th century. Mary Mathis Davis was born on February 12, 1958 in Lexington. Although her early years remain shrouded in mystery, what is known is that she had a sister named Lisa Hinkle whom she shared her childhood with. From playing games to exploring the outdoors, growing up together, the two sisters were a dynamic duo that nothing could come between. Lisa describes her sister as a beautiful, kind-hearted person who never failed to light up a room with her infectious smile. She also had a way of making everyone feel at ease. At some point, Mary met a man by the name of Richard Davis. As they got to know each other, a spark ignited between them, and before they knew it, they were swept up in a whirlwind romance. Their love grew stronger by the day, and Richard knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Mary. And so one day, with a heart full of hope, he asked her to be his wife. Mary was overwhelmed with joy, and without hesitation she said yes. After the proposal, the two lovebirds began to eagerly plan their life together as a couple. They spent hours on end talking about their future, discussing their dreams and hopes for the life they were about to embark on. The wedding day soon arrived, and the couple exchanged their vows in a romantic and intimate ceremony. After the wedding celebrations, and Richard found themselves starting a new chapter of their lives and looked forward in anticipation to the journey ahead. The years flew by, and before long, Mary and Richard were parents to two beautiful children. Their first child was a boy, while the second was a girl named Tracy who was born in 1986. The joy of parenthood was evident in the couple's home, as the sounds of laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet filled the air. Mary's heart overflowed with love, and she relished every moment spent with her children. To provide for her growing family, she took a job at Lanier's Ace Hardware, a store in Lexington. It wasn't the most glamorous work, but Mary didn't mind. She was grateful for the opportunity to earn a steady income. Though the money Mary earned wasn't much, It was enough to help cover the bills and put food on the table. Despite the challenges that came with juggling the responsibilities of motherhood and working a job, Mary remained steadfast in her determination to make the best life possible for her family. As the days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, life continued at a good pace. Mary's family was thriving and she felt a sense of contentment in her heart. But just when any of them least expected it, tragedy was waiting just around the corner, ready to strike. On the morning of May 30th, 1987, Mary left her home for work as usual. That Saturday felt like every other day, but little did she know that it would be her last on earth. As Mary arrived at work, she greeted her colleagues with a smile and began to go about her day. She jumped into her tasks with enthusiasm. However, as the hours ticked by, she began to feel increasingly restless and hungry. By noon, her stomach was growling and she found herself counting down the minutes to her lunch break. Eventually, the moment arrived and she was relieved that she had the chance to finally escape the confines of her workplace. Her heart also raced with anticipation as she imagined settling down to a delicious meal. She reached into her bag to make sure that she had enough money to buy herself lunch, and after confirming this, she made her way out of her store and headed for a nearby restaurant. This would be the last time anyone would see Mary alive. She never returned to work. Once the time for her lunch break was done, her absence became more noticeable with each passing second. Her colleagues couldn't help but wonder what was keeping her. As the minutes turned into what felt like hours, their confusion turned to worry. What could be taking her so long? Was she okay? A million questions raced through their mind as they tried to make sense of Mary's prolonged absence. With no sign of her return, they knew that they had to find her and fast. Without hesitation, one of them volunteered to search for her at the restaurant she had gone to for lunch. With heart racing, the coworker rushed to the restaurant, but Mary was nowhere to be found. The restaurant staff there were of no help either, and the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The coworker returned to the hardware store and reported that there was no sign of her. With this, fear began to grip the workers at the hardware store, and they knew they had to take more serious action. Without wasting another moment, they picked up the phone and dialed the emergency line. They told the operator everything they knew, and within minutes the police were on their way. They also called Mary's parents and her husband to let the family know what was happening. It was a difficult call to make, but they knew that it was the right thing to do. Police immediately began searching for Mary that very day, but at first the search yielded nothing. There was simply no trace of her. As the news of Mary's disappearance spread, the community became gripped with fear and uncertainty. Mary's family, on the other hand, were left to grapple with the agony of not knowing where she was or what had happened to her. However, they prayed and hoped that their beloved Mary would be found safe and sound. Richard could hardly sleep a wink that night. He tossed and turned in bed as his thoughts kept him awake. He knew deep down that something was terribly wrong. Mary's disappearance did not make sense to him, and he knew that it was not just a simple case of getting lost in the city. His thoughts drifted to their children and how he would face them the next day. They had been asking about their mother, innocently unaware of the danger she might be in. Richard couldn't bear the thought of telling them that she might never be coming home again, but he knew that he had to be strong for them. As the sun rose the following day, the search for Mary continued, but all the efforts seemed to be in vain. The police and Mary's family were on edge, desperate to find any leads on her sudden disappearance. As the day went on, the police suddenly received an emergency call that a dead body had been discovered behind the building of a local supermarket known as Winn-Dixie. A small team of police officers immediately raced to the scene. As they arrived, they saw a small crowd gathering around the area where the body had been discovered, and the officers quickly moved in to secure the area. They could see that the body had been there for some time. It was already beginning to give off a faint smell of decomposition. Upon closer inspection, they were able to identify the body as that of the woman they had been searching for. Shock and disbelief were evident on the officers, but they knew that they had work to do. The cause of death was not immediately apparent, so the police began to search the surrounding area for any clues. They also questioned the employees at the supermarket, but none of them seemed to know anything. Following this, the body was then taken away for an autopsy. That same day, a uniformed police officer arrived at the home of Mary's parents. He asked for Mary's father, who immediately stepped outside to speak to him. The air was thick with tension as the officer delivered the heartbreaking news. He explained what little they knew about what had happened to Mary and offered his condolences. The news was devastating and Mary's father was left shattered and grief-stricken. The rest of the family was also shocked and saddened. A few days after Mary's body was found, the results of the autopsy were out and they revealed that she had been strangled to death. In addition, it was also discovered that she had also been sexually assaulted. With this, her death was ruled a homicide. And so, as Mary's family struggled to come to terms with her loss and were left to pick up the pieces, the authorities began an investigation into her death. There were a lot of unanswered questions and they were determined to get to the root of it all. Detectives had with them pieces of evidence in the form of DNA that had been collected from the crime scene. However, due to the lack of technology at the time, there was little that could be done with this. Despite this, detectives worked tirelessly day and night, running down every lead and tip that came their way. They even asked for help from the public, hoping that someone would come forward with information that would crack the case wide open, but to no avail. The killer seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving the detectives feeling defeated. The days dragged on, turning into weeks and months, but the killer remained elusive. With each passing day, the detectives felt their grip on the case slipping away. Mary's family, however, never gave up hope and believed that one day justice would be served. They tried their best to move on with their lives, but the wounds of grief remained fresh in their hearts. In 2011, almost 25 years after Mary's murder, her sister Lisa made a bold move by speaking out about the tragedy that had befallen her family. She opened up to the media about the heartbreak they had endured, sharing how difficult life had been without her beloved sister by her side. As Lisa reminisced on their happy memories together, she also shared that the family had never given up hope that one day they would get the closure they so desperately sought. Yet despite the heartache and loss, she revealed that the family had no interest in seeking revenge, and that forgiveness was something she was willing to extend to whoever had taken Mary's life. In 2022, a new team of detectives that were assigned to the murder case decided to review the evidence available. They were well aware of the advances in DNA technology and knew that they had a better chance of solving the case now as compared to when it happened back in 1987. Following this, the detectives then submitted some physical evidence to the North Carolina State Crime Lab, going by the positive result that was obtained from the analysis of the evidence. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation was contacted to take a look at the case. Things began to move at a fast pace from there. The State Bureau of Investigation reached out to OTHRM, a private laboratory in Texas that specializes in forensic genealogy. DNA evidence from the case was then sent to OTHRM and their scientists were able to develop a genealogical profile for an unknown male suspect. After months of hard work, the unknown male suspect was finally identified. It was a man by the name of Russell Grant Wood. The discovery was a relief for detectives, and they knew without a doubt that the case was finally close to being solved. However, there was a problem. After doing a check on Russell's background, they found out that he had died back in 2013 at the age of 58, so there was no way to bring him to justice. According to what Lexington Police Chief Robbie Rummage later revealed during a press conference, Russell had been previously identified as a suspect in the case, but due to lack of sufficient evidence at the time, detectives had no choice but to direct their focus away from him. That was not all. It was also discovered that both Russell and Mary had known each other, but it is not clear what kind of relationship had existed between them. If Russell had been alive, the state would have proceeded with indictments and charged him with first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and first-degree rape. On February 3, 2023, Mary's surviving family were notified of the breakthrough in the case, and they expressed their gratitude to the detectives for their dedication to the case. We prayed that one day we would find the person who violently murdered our beloved Mary. We now have some answers. Although that won't bring Mary back, it does give us a sense of closure, Lori Martin, Mary's niece, had said. Mary's family later held a celebration in honor of her memory at the Forest Hill Memorial Park on February 12, 2023. She would have turned 65 on that day if she had still been alive. Mary was a light in this world, and we were blessed to have her as long as we did. She was a loving mother, sister, wife, aunt, and friend. We know she is resting easily in the arms of our Lord and Savior, Lori said. Although the mystery surrounding Mary's death has been unraveled and her killer has been identified, there are still a lot of questions that we will never know the answers to. 40 years ago, an American teenager was found bludgeoned to death in a cemetery in New Jersey. Her face was so badly injured that it was impossible to identify her at the time. The American public began to refer to her as Princess Doe, the Jane Doe who had died too young. For 4 decades, her real name has been a mystery, until now. Hi and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today's episode, I'm going to take you guys through the story of how Princess Doe was killed, how her identity was revealed, and how her killer was finally caught. Let's get right into it. Princess Doe was a previously unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was found murdered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey on the 15th of July, 1982. Her face had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. Her case gained national attention, and the public took a special interest in unraveling her story and finding answers. She became the first unidentified dead body to be entered into the National Crime Information Center. On the morning of Thursday, July 15, 1982, at around 8 a.m., gravedigger George Keyes discovered the body of a young girl in the rear section of the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. The body was found lying on its back, just over a steep bank that leads to a creek below. The victim's face had been beaten beyond recognition with a yet-to-be-determined object. Due to the significant decomposition of her body, even her eye color could not be confirmed. The young girl was dressed in a red short-sleeve shirt. A peasant-style skirt was found lying on top of the victim's legs. No footwear or undergarments were found. No conclusive evidence was found, but this was difficult to determine because of how much the body was decayed. A golden cross necklace was found tangled in the victim's hair. 2 earrings were found in her left ear. Red nail polish was found on the right hand only, and she had no surgical scars, distinct birthmarks, or tattoos. Scars or marks on the head or face area could not be known due to the condition of the body. Forensic anthropologists determined that the victim was not pregnant and had never given birth, and was most likely between the ages of 18 and 14 years old at the time of her death. Toxicology did not reveal any traces of drugs, but was not entirely conclusive, because of the time elapsed between the death and the discovery of the body. It is believed that the body was discovered after 2 to 3 days, or possibly even weeks, of exposure to the elements. This was especially difficult to determine because of the hot and humid weather in the area at that time. The forensic examination indicated that the girl had attempted to fight back or defend herself from her attacker, as injuries indicating trauma to her hands and arms were visible. The girl's body was buried in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was discovered in January 1983. Donated funds were used to pay for the victim's coffin and headstone. The headstone was engraved with the text, "Princess Doe, missing from home, dead among strangers, remembered by all." For many years, Princess Doe was thought to be Diane Janice Guy, a missing teenager from San Jose, California, who vanished on July 30, 1979. His theory was propagated by several law enforcement officials in the state of New Jersey, who went as far as to hold a press conference identifying Diane Dye as Princess Doe. However, Lieutenant Eric Krantz, the Princess Doe case's original lead investigator, maintained that Diane Dye was not a viable candidate for Princess Doe's identity. Krantz's feelings were shared by Diane's family and investigators in California, who were particularly angered by the conduct of the New Jersey law enforcement. In 2003, Princess Doe's DNA was compared with a DNA sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, and it was conclusively determined that Princess Doe was not Diane Dye. After seeing images of the girl's clothing in the newspaper, a witness named Amory Latimer reported to officials that she remembered seeing a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe purchasing cigarettes on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before her body was found. Latimer stated that she was shopping with her daughter at a supermarket across from the cemetery and observed and was able to describe the victim's clothing. The shirt and skirt themselves were traced to a manufacturer in the Midwestern United States, although the brand labels were missing. 3 people reported after viewing the photos that they had bought similar clothes at a Long Island store, which is now closed. On September 22, 1999, the body of Princess Doe was exhumed from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown so that DNA samples could be taken. The body was reburied in the same location. After a 2012 photo composite of the victim was released, it generated new tips as it resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory was submitted that Princess Doe may have been a runaway and could have been an individual using false names while employed at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In 2012, a sample of her hair and a tooth were examined through isotope analysis and indicated that the victim was most likely born in the United States, at least 7 to 10 months in the Midwestern or Northeastern United States. The tooth sample indicated she could be from Arizona. It is also believed that the girl had spent a long time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Krams, now retired, twined the name Princess Doe early in the investigations and also managed to get the case covered extensively in the media. The case was used as the impetus for recording unidentified crime victims in the MCIC database at the national level. Princess Doe became the first such case entered by the FBI director. After extensive print media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Krams, who was the original lead investigator from the Blairstown Police Department, was contacted by HBO regarding the Princess Doe case and asked if the channel could chronicle the case in an upcoming documentary entitled Missing. Krantz agreed, and the segment was filmed over several weeks. Krantz was shown following leads as they came in. The documentary featured actual footage of the recovery of Princess Doe's body, along with footage shot by HBO of Princess Doe's 1983 funeral. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in 2012, in hopes of generating new information about the case. The same year, the most recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN. On July 15, 2012, a memorial service was held for the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe being discovered at the top of the ravine where her remains were found. Over 100 citizens attended, as well as several reporters and cameras. The victim's clothing, as well as her photo reconstructions, were on display for public viewing. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a missing persons rally in the area. In the years between the first discovery in the body and the final identification, several theories cropped up. The first one was that Princess Doe was actually Diane Dye, a young girl missing from California, which has now been definitively disproved. Secondly, the killer of Princess Doe was already imprisoned for another homicide. A man called John Reese was briefly suspected, as he was convicted of killing another woman in nearby Belvedere, New Jersey. But there was no real evidence of a connection with Princess Doe. The third theory was that Princess Doe was either a runaway that was known to work in the Ocean City, Maryland area, or a prostitute who worked at the local truck stop. The information for these two possibilities was highly inconclusive. Nobody from the local area came forward to identify Princess Doe, on or off the record. It seems unlikely that not one single person would come forward if she was known in the area. The fourth and disturbing theory was that Princess Doe was killed by a Blairstown police officer, and that is why the case was never solved. But this claim is completely unsubstantiated. There are retired local law enforcement officers who still follow and contribute to the case, even after 40 years. The fifth theory was that Princess Doe was a victim of a serial killer known to operate in the area, such as John Kleiss, Henry Lee Lucas, or Jill Rifkin. Though local law enforcement was aware of these claims, none were found to be credible. A sixth theory was that Princess Doe was an out-of-state teenager who worked at an area camp. Again, this was never proven. And now we come to the seventh theory, that Princess Doe was killed by a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For many years, this was the most current theory. Many of the facts fit the case, and this theory was explored on the America's Most Wanted website. Several New York Newsday articles reference this theory that was published in 1999 and 2000. Mr. Kinlaw was already imprisoned for other crimes, but since Princess Doe's body wasn't identified, His involvement in her murder could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Princess Doe's body was re-exhumed in November 2020 using a grant, and she underwent DNA extraction for genetic genealogy. In May 2021, investigators were notified by the NCMEC, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were collaborating with Astria Forensics about obtaining DNA markers from degraded samples of Princess Doe's body using a grant. On June 18, 2021, investigators received the news that Astria Forensic agreed to extract DNA and construct a DNA profile. On February 10, 2022, Astria Forensics relayed to investigators that the creation of a DNA data file was successful. The results were sent to the NCMEC's consulting genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations. The managing officer was Jennifer Moore, who agreed to perform unlimited genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22, 2022, Innovative Forensics announced to investigators that they had found a candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators went to West Battle on New York, where they met Robert Alignac Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from Princess Doe's sister, which mitotyping technology used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory assisted by creating an STR-DNA profile through the victim's sister's DNA sample. Mitotyping technology sent their results to the Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory, then sent both the mitochondrial DNA and STR-DNA profiles through the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. On April 29, 2022, the center identified Princess Doe as Dawn Alignac. Her identity was formally announced on July 15, 2022, the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Alignac Jr. said that Alignac left their home at her mother's request, and she was never seen or heard from again. Way back in 1999, evidence came to light that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw may have been involved in Princess Doe's murder. Donna was arrested in California for attempting to commit welfare fraud by using the name Eliana, which was traced to a Long Island native. When the police questioned her, she gave them details about the murder of Linda, and her testimony put the Kinlaws behind bars. Donna gave details about 2 murders Arthur had committed of 2 other female victims who remain unidentified today. After Arthur was faced with a death sentence, Donna told authorities that Kinlaw had killed another woman, a sex worker, earlier in 1982. She told police that she was with Arthur in the cemetery and witnessed him commit the murder. Another report states that Donna Kinlaw said that in July 1982, her husband brought home a teenage girl, left home, and returned without her. He later apparently disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. Afterward, he threatened his wife, claiming if she did not attend her job, he would take her life as he did to the girl he brought home. However, a lack of cooperation meant that Arthur Kinlaw was not charged. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case as a member of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, from which he is now retired, stated that Kinlaw claimed responsibility for her death, but I have no physical evidence to confirm that. And without the identity of Princess Doe, I have no way of connecting the dots, so to speak, putting her in a place where he could have been or would have been at the same time. Spears also reported that he doubted the confession because the Kinlaws could not provide a name for Princess Doe, even though they claimed to have been with her for some time. Even though he questioned the credibility of their statements, Spears does not believe the victim was native to Long Island, New York. However, Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch of the girl she claimed to have met, which does resemble the most recent composite. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder. Following the 2022 investigation of Princess Doe as Dawn Alignac, Arthur Kinlaw was reconsidered as a suspect and later charged with Alignac's murder. Dawn Alignac was born on August 5, 1964. She had been a junior at Connequot High School in Bohemia, New York, where she had lived with her mother and sister, authorities said, but she soon moved out of the family home. According to her brother, she was thrown out of her home by her mom. She ended up getting killed in a cemetery, leaving no clue as to her real identity. But for more than 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was no secret. In 1999, the wife of Arthur Kinlaw, a convicted pimp who today is serving time for the murder of many other Long Island women, tied her husband not only to those deaths, but to the brutal slaying of the girl in the Blairstown cemetery. In an interview with Newsday at the time, Donna Kinlaw recounted how her husband in the summer of 1982 brought a girl of about 18 years old back to their central Islip home. She told the newspaper as well as police that her husband left with the woman but later returned home alone, appearing shaken. About 2 weeks later, according to Newsday, she read that police in Belvedere, New Jersey had found the body of a dead girl who fit the description of the girl who was in their house that night. He kept saying, "What does it say? What does it say? Does it say who the person was who got killed?" She said her husband asked. From the story she read aloud to her husband, Donna Kinlaw told Newsday that she remembered that the New Jersey police named the dead girl Princess Jane Doe. Not long afterward, investigators exhumed her body to recover the murder victim's femur bone in hopes of using her DNA to identify her. And in fact, investigators acknowledged that Arthur Kinlaw confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating back to 2005. But it was not until April of this year that Don Olnett was positively identified. Arthur Kinlaw, now 68, is currently imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York on 2 other first-degree murder convictions from 2000. Among them was a teenager he knew only as Linda in April 1984 in the Bronx, Newsday reported. "I strangled her with my hands," said Kinlaw. "She was hit about the head by me with a bat." Arthur Kinlaw has now been charged with 1 count of homicide as the result of the subsequent investigation, witness statements, and his confession of Olegnac's murder. It is believed that after Don Olegnac refused his demands to go into prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey. They both ended up in Blairstown, where Kinlaw murdered her in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Olegnac nor Kinlaw had a connection with the town. Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Investigators are now looking to piece together Don Olegnac's movements in the time leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, also DNA Doe Project Incorporated, or DDP, is an American non-profit volunteer organization formed to identify unidentified deceased persons, or commonly known as John or Jane Doe, by using forensic genealogy. Their volunteers identified victims of automobile accidents, homicides, and unusual circumstances, such as persons who committed suicide under an alias. The group was founded in 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press. Unraveling the mystery of Princess Doe has been a sensational success for genealogical DNA testing of exactly this kind. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact. And for the case of Princess Doe, that was exactly what happened. A molar root weighing just 200 kilograms would hold the answers that had eluded investigators for close to 40 years. With the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Princess Doe's molar and eyelash were submitted to Astria Forensics in 2021 for possible DNA extraction. What is so special about Astria is that they can extract DNA from samples that are degraded or otherwise would provide no value, said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC. "We knew that if anyone could get the information that was needed, Astria could. And they did." Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Astria Forensics, told NCMEC that they were lucky to find that the DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for millions of pieces of information to be gathered to complete the DNA profile. This single DNA extract contained hundreds of millions of unique human DNA fragments, said Kelly. "With these sequencing data, we were able to reconstruct her whole genome single nucleotide polymorphisms or SMP profile. This resulted in Astria being able to deliver genotype files to NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office that could go on and be used to complete Princess Doe's genealogy. This technology that would not have been possible 40 years ago was just the break the investigators had been hoping for to identify Princess Doe's identity." Once Astria finished the sequencing, Innovative Forensic Investigations, or IFI, started to work on investigative genetic genealogy techniques to build a family tree that would ultimately lead to the true identity of Princess Doe, or who we now know as Don Olegnec. This work was only possible because of the collaborative effort of each agency, said Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI. "Our team brings forward a diverse set of skills that allows us to help find answers to cases." Echoing Moore's sentiment in today's press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer reiterated that science and technology made the impossible possible in this case. Dawn's case was deeply personal for the investigators involved, and their push for answers and justice never wavered. Dawn's family expressed deep gratitude to everyone who worked to find answers in Dawn's case. "This is a very big deal for my family," said Dawn's cousin. "I'd like to thank Blairstown for treating my cousin like she was one of their own. Touches our family deeply. My cousin is always in my heart," he said while tapping the photo of Dawn pinned to his chest. "Blairstown gave a dare war and gave up. We were greatly appreciative of that." Since Princess Doe was the first unidentified persons case to be entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, by the director of the FBI, William Webster, on June 30, 1983. This was a historic moment for missing and unidentified persons that has continued to play a crucial role in investigations since. The entry in NCIC has remained current and alive until today, when she will be removed. The tenacity of law enforcement has never stopped, and they continue to pour resources and new technology into solving this case. And it's thanks to the collaboration between police authorities and genealogical DNA testing experts that Princess Doe was publicly identified on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of her body as Dawn Ulinick. Today's case takes us to the beautiful coastline of Oxnard, California. It is a place filled with beautiful sunsets and a plethora of opportunities for young adults. It has many notable landmarks, like the Central Carnegie Art Museum, which displays contemporary California art. Although many people find this place to be truly breathtaking, it was also the site of one of the most heinous crimes committed during the 1980s, which cut short the lives of two vibrant young women. This is Rachel Zenais, who was born on November 20th, 1960. She had an older brother named Roy Rodriguez. Though we don't have much information about their background in early life, we do know that Roy was already settled by the time Rachel began to support herself financially. Rachel got married and became a mom of two young girls while she was still in her teens. Her first daughter, Eva, was born in 1978, and her next daughter, Monica, was born in 1980. However, things weren't going well with her husband, so at the age of 20 in 1980, she decided to leave him. However, Rachel wasn't well off financially, which also meant that with the divorce, she would have to start working and supporting herself and her two daughters. By 1981, a year after the birth of her youngest daughter, she was finally free from her toxic marriage. However, instead of simply working odd jobs and struggling to get by, she aspired to have a degree. And since she hadn't been able to complete her studies because of her marriage and children, Rachel thought that she would finally take this opportunity to continue her studies. She enrolled at Oxnard College in California. While she got back on her feet, she moved in with her brother in Camarillo, and he helps her get her family together and get back on her feet. Being a full-time student, working shifts at a part-time job, and being a full-time mom, things were difficult for Rachel. She was finding it difficult to split her time and attention between all these things, so she decided to hire multiple babysitters for her two kids while she was out at work or college. During the day, she would go to college, then work her shifts, and then she would return home in the evening. Her babysitters would only make their way home when she arrived. If it was too late, Rachel would often drop them off at their homes herself. This was Rachel's routine until the fateful event that would change the lives of those around her. On January 18, 1981, two newspaper delivery boys stumbled onto Rachel's naked body in a carport in Camarillo, near her brother's apartment complex where she was living. She had never returned home the night before after dropping the babysitters back home. When the newspaper boys saw the body, they quickly called 911 and reported the matter. When the police arrived at the crime scene, an immediate investigation was launched. Rachel's body seemed to have bruise marks over her neck and shoulders. Her body was also found completely bare. When the investigators conducted an autopsy, they found that Rachel had been strangled to death. She had also been forcefully assaulted prior to her murder. The gravity of the crime was heavy, which made the police want to find the killer as soon as possible. They theorized that Rachel had been ambushed outside her brother's Camarillo home. She was then assaulted on the patio of a nearby vacant apartment and then strangled and died of asphyxiation. The police conducted detailed interviews with neighbors and others who lived in the vicinity, hoping to find out if anyone had seen or heard anything the night before. According to her neighbors and her brother, Rachel had gone to drop off the babysitters like she did most days after returning from work. However, on that day, something bad happened when she got out of her vehicle after returning home. The crime scene was crucial in helping the police gather evidence. There were sperm traces and fingerprints all over her naked body. However, at the time, DNA evidence couldn't be used to identify suspects in the system. It could only be used to match against a suspect who had already been identified. The police looked into a number of other leads and even tried retracing her steps that night, but they found nothing. Eventually, the case went cold. The second woman involved in this story is Lisa Gondek, who was also born in 1960 on the 9th of November. She lived in Connecticut throughout her childhood and teenage years. However, when she turned 21, she decided to move out and find a job to support herself. Though there is not much information about Lisa's background available, we do know that she never married and did not have any children. In 1981, Lisa moved to California from her hometown in Connecticut. When Lisa got to Oxnard, she moved in with her childhood best friend and was living with her. Being a humble and easygoing person, Lisa never found it hard to make friends. Due to her friendly nature, it was easy for her to get a job. Within a few days of her moving to another state, Lisa managed to find work at a teen clothing store in the Esplanade Shopping Center in Oxnard. She then went on to work there for almost a year. However, little did she know that her life would soon come to a tragic end. On December 12, 1981, a 911 call sparked the attention of the police in Oxnard. The call reported a fire at an Oxnard apartment. When the firefighters arrived, they did their best to control the damage. However, they were shocked to find a dead, naked woman in the bathtub. Upon seeing this, the firefighters immediately notified the police for assistance. When the police arrived, they identified the victim as none other than Lisa Gondek. She was 21 when she died. An autopsy conducted after securing crucial DNA evidence from the crime scene confirmed that Lisa had been forcefully assaulted before she was killed. There were strangulation marks around her neck similar to the ones found on Rachel's body. Whoever committed the crime had killed her, and then set the apartment on fire to cover their tracks. But who could have made that 911 call? Well, a further investigation revealed that Lisa's neighbors had heard screams. However, they didn't call 911 until they smelled smoke coming from her apartment. Right before she was murdered, Lisa had just informed her mother that she would be home for Christmas. Sadly, she would now never be able to make it. With 2 murders having been committed within a year in Oxnard, the police were under pressure to catch the culprits behind either of these murders. However, it was difficult to crack the case. The investigators in the murder of Lisa found that there were no probable suspects on the list of people they had interrogated, and with no further leads to follow, they eventually had to give up on the case, and just like Rachel's case before it, it too went cold. In 2004, 23 years after the murders of Lisa and Rachel, advancements in DNA technology had now made solving cold cases easier, since all that was needed to be done was to enter the DNA evidence into the national systems and wait for the results to show. The Oxnard police and investigators who were handling these 2 cases wanted to take this opportunity to solve the cases, since they had crucial evidence that had been collected from both of the crime scenes. When they re-examined the files from both cases, they began to notice the similarities between the 2 murders. The first were the marks found on their bodies. Both Rachel and Lisa had strikingly similar marks, and both of them were forcefully assaulted and strangled. The second similarity was that both victims had visited a pub named Huntington's in the hours before their deaths. Though the pub is now closed, it was a hot spot that was just across from the Esplanade Mall where Lisa had worked. On uploading the DNA evidence found in both crime scenes, there were no matches in the system at the time, but the DNA matched the sample from the other case. This is when the police realized that the similarities between Rachel's and Lisa's death were because both of them had been killed by the same person. This meant that the crimes committed against Lisa and Rachel were committed by the same suspect who was still on the loose. However, there was a downside to this. No one matched the suspect profile the police were searching for. There was no information on the suspect in the national systems, which eventually made the case turn cold once again. Almost 4 decades later, the murders of Lisa and Rachel still remain unsolved. Though the police found out that the suspect they were looking for was one person and not two, they couldn't proceed any further in solving this case. Rachel's brother Roy Rodriguez regularly called the police and asked for updates on his sister's murder case. And why shouldn't he? Rachel was taken too soon, leaving behind her 2 young daughters who were orphaned at the tender ages of 2 and 1. In order to try and find a match, the detectives and police officers working on this double homicide cold case decided to team up and work with genetic genealogists in 2019. The hunt for the suspect led to the cold cases being opened again as active investigations. This time, the investigators reviewed user-submitted DNA profiles that were made publicly available. This, they thought, was a great start, as it would provide them with enough information to learn more about their genealogy and perhaps even trace the suspect through their family tree. As the team worked together, they managed to finally narrow down their search to one person. This person also matched the evidence at the crime scene in 1981. His name was identified as Tony Garcia, and he was now a 68-year-old man. Tony Garcia was born in 1955. His birthplace was in the state of New Mexico. When he grew older, he joined the Navy. After completing his services with the Navy, Tony then found work as a karate instructor in Oxnard, California. When the Ventura County Police then tracked his age and his whereabouts in 1981, they found that Tony was 26 years old at the time and would often visit Huntington's. It was there that he noticed Rachel and stalked her. He then showed up unannounced on January 18, 1981, and ended her life. Lisa Gondek also used to frequent the same pub after Rachel was murdered, and this led to her death almost 11 months later. After these revelations, further background checks done on Tony revealed that he worked as a carpenter after the killings in 1981. What was even more astonishing was that Tony was actually in the same town the whole time. Once he had settled in Oxnard, he continued to live there even after committing these heinous crimes. All the time that the investigation into Rachel's and Lisa's murders was ongoing, he managed to remain hidden in plain sight. However, why hadn't the Ventura police found him suspicious? Well, no one knew it was him until 2019, when DNA evidence gathered from the crime scene revealed his identity. Despite learning that it was Tony behind the murders in 2019, he managed to evade arrest for another 4 years. No one could find him. It was only quite recently, in February 2023, that Ventura County law enforcement arrested and charged Garcia for 2 counts of murder with special allegations. These charges included multiple killings, kidnapping, and forcible sexual assault. However, the district attorney's office could not decide whether to seek the death penalty or life in prison without parole. The 68-year-old was booked and bail was set at $2 million bond. In February 2023, Eric Nazarenko, the Ventura County District Attorney, gave a statement on the case. After more than 4 decades, justice is finally coming to the families of Rachel Zenais and Lisa Gondek. Thankfully, Ventura County Police never gave up on solving the murder of these 2 young souls, Lisa and Rachel. All we know for now is that Tony is held at Ventura County Main Jail while police search more information from the public, including any possible links to other crimes. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.